Good afternoon. Hello, my name is Ted Holsey. I'm Vice President of Marketing at eFolder and your host for today's event. Welcome to the eFolder Expert Series. This webinar series brings together experts from eFolder's staff and partner community for deep dive discussions on key service and technical topics. The topic for today's webinar is AppAssure V5 live demo, how one partner wins big with the eFolder AppAssure Cloud. Today we are joined by Jonas Vachal, President and CEO of Vertex Computer Consulting. Before we go through the agenda, let's cover a couple housekeeping items. Today's session is being recorded. The recorded version of the webinar will be made available on eFolder's YouTube channel. We will also make copies of the slides available to those who attended the event. With over 180 people registered for today's session, we put all participants in a listen-only mode. You can enjoy the audio portion of today's event by either streaming it to your computer or by dialing in over the phone. Questions are strongly encouraged throughout today's webinar. We've planned a special Q&A session at the end of today's discussion, but you may submit as we go along, and we will try to address your questions on the fly. Jonas is going to first explore some of the unique challenges facing MSPs and solution providers in today's backup and disaster recovery market. Then he will show why he decided to standardize on AppAssure and eFolder for his managed service offerings. And lastly, he will discuss how he's incorporating backup and disaster recovery into his thriving managed service practice. He will actually have a live demo of several of the technologies and features we're discussing on today's webinar. Now let me introduce today's expert. Jonas Vachal is President and CEO of Vertex Consulting Group, an MSP whose home office is in Billings, Montana. Jonas founded Vertex in 2007 after spending several years leading a team of automation developers for an ISV. Today, he spends most of his time in a consultative and VCIO role addressing the strategic needs of existing clients. Jonas, welcome to today's webinar.
Thank you, Ted.
Okay, so let's advance the slides, and I'm going to give you keyboard and mouse control. And the floor is yours, Jonas.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank Ted and the team at eFolder for inviting me to present today. I really can't speak highly enough about their entire team. We've had a very good experience in all of our interactions with eFolder, from everybody in support to everybody in sales. So like Ted mentioned, if there's any questions during this webinar, please feel free to voice them. I'd like for this to be kind of as informational and interactive for all of you as possible. And really to kind of get started, from our perspective as an MSP, we've got a responsibility to our clients to really kind of protect them from three different types of interruptions. That first interruption being the kind of common everyday disasters, events like hardware failures, events like disk drive failures occur quite frequently. Users delete or lose files, software updates, corrupt databases. User error is kind of a key contributing factor to these everyday disasters. Secondly, site-wide disasters are far less common, but can be quite deadly for not only us as an MSP, but for our clients. Fire or property insurance always seems like a needless expense until you actually need it. In the eyes of our clients, the same goes for backup and disaster recovery preparedness. Most businesses cannot survive the complete loss of critical business data. If customer records, financials, and account records are destroyed, most businesses, including our own, would have a hard time recovering from such an event. Lastly, we kind of need to protect our clients from any kind of system downtime. It's such a competitive market today that the fast eat the slow. One of the key selling points for any MSP is the reduction in downtime. Our clients can't afford for their staff to be unproductive. Servers, workstations, and mobile devices all have to operate at their peak and optimal performance. So salespeople, engineers, knowledge workers, and support personnel can get their jobs done. If disasters do occur, the recovery time needs to be quick, and the recovery needs to be complete. During our proposal development phase as an MSP, we take our clients through a real gut check to help them define their own internal RTO and RPO. It's a valuable exercise in the sales process, as it allows us to position the client's productivity and profitability as a key concern of ours, which we can then further leverage in the sales process. The customizable protection schedules and the roll-up that we have in AppAssure, coupled with the eFolder Continuity Cloud, really allows us to meet some of the most stringent recovery time objectives and recovery point objectives that our clients could present us with. We've worked with several other image-based backup solutions prior to our migration to AppAssure, and we, like a lot of other MSPs, have had several pain points with some of the other vendors. That first pain point is we always know, through either email reporting or through our RMM tools, we always know when a server or when an image-based backup is successful or the image snapshot fails. But what we were always unsure of is if that image is in a consistent state. So with AppAssure, we really benefit from the application-aware and consistency checking that it provides behind the scenes. It was really it solved that key problem that we've had. The second problem we've had is managing the on-site and off-site storage requirements. That was always shoddy at best for us. The features in AppAssure 5, the global deduplication and compression, has really addressed a lot of those issues that we've had with other image-based backup vendors. Another kind of pain point we've had is having to rebase and re-replicate those base images off-site. Avoid the long recovery chains. That whole process was pretty painful. For some of our larger clients, we were having to rebase and re-replicate every couple of months just because the volume of data was so high. The granular retention policies and roll-ups that we get with AppAssure has really eliminated that struggle for us. Continuity was always the biggest challenge for us. For us internally to stand up, a cold production environment of our own that was large enough to support some of our larger clients in the event of a site disaster wouldn't have been fiscally responsible. The environments that we support, to put a cold environment to replicate to and then to virtualize on, to sit idle most of the time just wasn't a good venture of capital. So we partnered with eFolder, and their Continuity Cloud eliminates the need for us to kind of procure and maintain our old cold site, and we can also commit to a 24-hour SLA for our clients. I need to go back. So this slide kind of demonstrates how we deploy AppAssure at our client sites. The initial piece of hardware, we deploy a BDR device on premise that runs the AppAssure 5 core service. The BDR source core is what we call it, receives image-based snapshots from protected servers that have an agent installed on them. And this source core keeps a local, globally deduped and compressed backup repository. eFolder then provides us with a target core in the eFolder AppAssure Cloud that we set up as a replication target for our source core. The eFolder AppAssure Cloud is backed by the same eFolder storage cloud that has backed their file-based solution for ages, and it's just been a great solution for us. In the event of a site-wide disaster, we can recover critical services onto the eFolder Continuity Cloud and establish connectivity from our client sites right away. The AppAssure eFolder relationship really is a turnkey solution for us partners. I'll echo the same sentiment that I made earlier. I couldn't be more happy with our experience with the entire eFolder team, and that now they're providing this turnkey solution that provides AppAssure, which we feel is the best of breed image-based solution out there. Marrying that with the AppAssure eFolder Cloud for the replication target, their storage cloud that they've used to power their file-based backup solution for quite some time, and the Continuity Cloud for the site-wide disasters has just been a big win for us as a partner. I suspect that most everybody in the audience has some technical background. So for the meat of this presentation, I really wanted to highlight on the features of AppAssure that were most important for us. And I could talk for the better portion of the day about all the features of AppAssure, but in the interest of time, I'll just touch on the 4 that really sold us. The first being the application-aware snapshots and integrity checks. The next is their chain-free retention policies and snapshot rollups. Global deduplication and compression, which has drastically reduced our storage requirements. And the alerting, reporting, and task management that we use from an operational side to ensure that we're providing the RPO and RTO that we sold our clients. My favorite feature of AppAssure is the one that saves me and my team the most time, and really at the end of the day it helps me sleep better at night. Application-aware snapshots and integrity checks. The AppAssure software will actually mount and perform attachability tests for both Exchange and SQL. So I don't spend days worrying if I could revive a failed Exchange server. I don't spend days worrying if a SQL server dies, if that image-based backup I have will bring the database back in a consistent state. The next feature that we really kind of like that helps sell us is their chain-free retention policies and roll-up procedures. With a customizable retention policy, we have the ability to modify the automatic roll-up process to assure that we can meet the client's RPO that we defined in that proposal development process and that gut check phase that we take every client through when defining how much data could they afford to lose and how long could they afford to be, without critical services. Global dedupe is probably my second favorite feature of AppAssure 5. The global deduplication has greatly reduced our on-premise and off-site storage requirements. And because the deduplication happens on already encrypted data, it's a perfect solution for use in a multi-tenant environment. As an example, our largest source core protects 26 servers, and these 26 servers comprise about 7 terabytes of raw data. That source core's repository, after dedupe and compression, is using just shy of 2 terabytes. So you really get the benefit of that global deduplication. Operating system volumes are a perfect instance of that. If you have a 20 gig Windows Server 2008 R2 volume, and there's 20 of those servers in production, the storage requirements are really, the base or the first instance of that OS volume, and the very small deltas that exist from server to server based on what Windows updates are there and what software is installed in the program files.
Hey Jonas, before we go on, if we could go back, there is a question I'd like. I think we should try to tackle right now. So
okay.
Jason, he's got two-part question here. But the first part of the question I'll answer because I think it's a pretty simple, quick answer. But so the first part of the question is for offsite replication. If we ship a base image to eFolder, what is the turnaround time for the data to be consumed by the eFolder core? And the answer to that is 48 hours. So if you ship in physical media to us, our SLA back to our partners is 48 hours to seed the data into the data center. And then the other part of the question, and Jonas, I'll let you take this, but what are bandwidth recommendations for, say, a 3 gigabyte daily change rate?
That's going to be, it's a little tough to answer. Now, 3 gigabytes or 3 terabytes of daily
3 gigabytes.
3 gigabytes of daily change. Without knowing, if that 3 gigabytes is, post or pre-deduplication and compression, that's a little tough to answer. The replication speed, the offsite replication speed, from the eFolder side, it has always been fantastic for us and highly dependent on the connectivity we've got at the local site. But I would say, if you've got no more than 5 megabits up, that's probably sufficient for that kind of daily change. Our largest, I'll go back to kind of this largest deployment that we have where we've got 26 local servers protected. We probably have upwards of 20 gig of daily change. But after the deduplication and compression, we don't see the number of how much data is actually there. But we've had no trouble with that site on a 15 megabit up connection. So I don't know that I really answered your question. It's tough to say without knowing if that's three.
Yeah, mileage may vary. I mean, it's kind of a fairly technical, fairly specific question for an environment you only know very little about. So that's okay. But a different question came in. Ben asks, is data deduped across the entire eFolder cloud or across the service provider's set of client backups, or just across each client's backups?
I can take that one up. Data is deduped per repository, and let me make a note to kind of touch on that as we get into the demo. Okay. So the deduplication actually occurs per individual repository. So the way, if you're familiar with AppAssure 4, deduplication happened per agent because the volume, or there wasn't really a concept of a backup repository in AppAssure 4. You just gave it a folder location where to store these backup images in the TiVo repository. But with AppAssure 5, they've changed that, and you actually specify a repository of a set size. So, for example, 3 terabytes. AppAssure 5 behind the scenes will consume all 3 terabytes and create kind of a transparent backup repository where it handles all the deduplication inside that. So if the same block of data exists inside that repository, it won't write again. It will just reference that block of data that exists in the repository already. But that happens kind of per repository, and you're allowed to have multiple repositories per source or target core, but it does happen on a per repository. So our eFolder target cores are configured with an individual repository, and we may put one or more clients on that same target core, and we get the benefit of the deduplication inside a single repository.
Okay, great. No more questions around this area for now.
Okay. So we'll kind of move on to if I can get our PowerPoint to change here. To alerting, reporting, and management. We put a lot of emphasis into the backup and disaster recovery process during our sales approach. So our operational side really has to be able to deliver. So the alerting and task management features in AppAssure 5 are very robust and very granular. We monitor for every failure condition that AppAssure can generate. This includes failed attachability checks, failed snapshots, partial snapshots, failed replication. And we'll go through that in the demo because I'll show you that the screenshot doesn't really do it a lot of justice. But in the demo, we'll kind of go through the list of all the different types of events that the AppAssure core service itself can alert on. And what we've done is integrated that with, we're a ConnectWise partner as well, so ConnectWise is our PSA. We've integrated that with ConnectWise and have a board, kind of laid out specifically for both our file-based and our image-based backups. And it's one of the first ones that gets worked in the morning when the NOC technicians show up. So now we'll get over to the actual live demo, and I've got a note here to kind of touch on that deduplication per repository. So we'll change things around here a little bit.
So Jonas, yeah, I've given you full control over there. So
okay, and you can see Can see our core here?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. So what we've got here is, an environment built up for this demo that kind of presents both a source core, which is what you would have on-premise at the customer site, and a target core on the eFolder side. And so our source core has one protected machine right now. It's just a vanilla Windows Server 2008 instance. It's not running SQL. It's not running Exchange. So I'll have to kind of highlight those attachability features and that application integrity checks a little differently. But for those of you that are familiar with AppAssure 4, the console and the GUI is entirely different in 5. It is web-based now, and I like it quite a bit. So the first thing I kind of wanted to touch on during the demo is the application-aware snapshots and the integrity checks that happen after every snapshot. And because the demo machine doesn't have SQL and it doesn't have Exchange, I can't really show you those features, but I can show you kind of the configurability that we get for the attachability, at least on the SQL side. So in the core configuration, you can specify SQL instances for.
Hey, Jonas, sorry to interrupt, but just there's Joe asks, kind of just from a definitional perspective. I know if people aren't familiar with AppAssure software, they're maybe not familiar with this technical term of core. Can you give a definition of what a core is before we kind of go into how to configure one and that sort of thing?
Absolutely. So the architecture of the AppAssure software is based around a core and an agent. So the core is the essential service or the centralized service that manages the backup repository and the protection schedules and handles all the deduplication and compression and replication. It in and of itself is a standalone piece of software that has a web front end to it. The agents is just a thin, I believe it's a service, a Windows service that runs on the protected machine, consumes about 30 to 45 megs of memory and just kind of runs in the background as a Windows service. So you're on the core, you specify your agents for protection. And we've done that here. We can see this Vertex CG demo is a protected agent. And we can define its what are called protection schedules. So right now we are protecting this agent every 60 minutes during the week and every 60 minutes on the weekend. And we do have the ability to configure, if we want interval protection, every 60 minutes, every 180 minutes. We can do daily protection, so where you can specify just a snapshot once per day. And each volume on the agent can have a different protection schedule. So if you've got a file server, for example, where nothing really changes on the operating system volume, but you've got a data volume that has a lot of files on it that are very transactional, users are changing them all the day, at different points during the day, you can maybe have a daily on the operating system and an hourly on the data volume. So that's hierarchy, the hierarchy of how AppAssure is laid out and the difference between a core and an agent.
Great.
No other questions right now?
Just one quick housekeeping item. Just want to address this real quick. Michael wants to know, are you guys all going to get copies of the slides? And the answer is yes. And Mark wants to know, is there going to be a recording of the session? And the answer to that is yes, and it will be available on eFolder's YouTube channel probably within about 12 hours from now.
Okay, so back to our attachability checks at least for SQL. To perform attachability checks, the core or the machine that runs the core service does require an instance of SQL. And we're able to specify SQL 2005, 2008, 08R2 and 2012. So when you apply a protection schedule to a machine that it has detected as having SQL on it, you can specify which of the SQL agents you want to perform the attachability checks against. And so when the snapshot actually occurs, it will try to mount the SQL database to the local SQL instance that's running on the core machine. And that's just to ensure that we got a valid VSS snapshot of the database, and that should we ever have to recover, like a bare metal recovery or a virtual recovery of that SQL server, that when the machine gets brought up, that the SQL instances are healthy, they're intact, we don't have any corruption in the database themselves. We also can do log truncation after it successfully mounts the SQL database. It can truncate logs to recapture storage space that generates in the transactional log on the database side. The Exchange attachability, very similar. We don't have an Exchange server kind of tied up to this core, so it's a little tough to show, but you have the same kind of configurability that you do with SQL. You can tell it to mount the Exchange databases, verify their integrity. We also have message level recovery from AppAssure. So the feature set is very robust and very healthy. And because we have these attachability and mountability checks that are being done, I don't have to worry about performing a recovery on Exchange or SQL and not knowing if that instance is going to come back up in a healthy state. The next feature I think we'll go through.
So Jonas, before we leave this section, I guess let's quickly address this question. I don't know the person's name because it's just their email address, but it says, does it protect attachability and do attachability checks for databases other than SQL, or can it do MySQL or Pervasive?
That I'm not 100% certain of. I don't believe so, but that is probably definitely something I could follow up on. If the my contact information, I believe, was at the beginning of the slide deck. It's probably again at the end. I can definitely reach out to my support contact at AppAssure and find out. I don't believe so. I've never had, I don't have MySQL in production anywhere that would require it. That's a great question. I can sure try to find an answer.
Yeah, I think the answer today is no, but the interesting thing is, Dell, AppAssure is now owned by Dell, and, we're seeing a lot of good indications on the product roadmap for the AppAssure software, meaning that, Dell's unleashing a lot more development resources coming down the pike. So, potentially, yes, is kind of the answer, but right now the case is no. So.
Okay, so the retention policies is the next piece I wanted to touch on, and this is conceptually similar, but very much different than the father, grandfather chain that we're used to, where we almost have a waterfall of recovery points and how they're rolled up. So if we take this retention policy screen from the top down, we're specifying here that we're going to keep all the recovery points we have for a minimum of 3 days. That could be an hourly recovery point. It could be a daily recovery point. So regardless of whatever we do, how often our recovery or snapshot runs, we're going to keep each of those recovery points for 3 days. After that 3-day point, we're going to start kind of honoring these roll-up settings. And that's where we're going to keep 1 recovery point per hour for up to 2 days. We're going to keep 1 recovery point per day for up to 4 days. You can just see how that kind of waterfalls into the next step. And these are all configurable. We can specify we want to keep or yearlies or don't want to keep yearlies. And we can specify, these are all adjustable. We can say 4 days, 2 days. Again, these are all adjustable. So we have a lot of configurability on the retention policy. And because the roll-up happens as a nightly job, that we can configure the time at what it starts, you can configure it at a time where performing the roll-up isn't going to affect the performance of taking your snapshots, so that, those chains will roll up and keep those images based on this schedule. The big piece, and I made a note here to kind of talk about deduplication per repository. This machine has a single repository created. It's about 500 gigs. We're just protecting one machine, so we don't show a whole lot of the deduplication power. But if we come into this repository, deduplication happens per individual repository. So we have one repository created, and we specify that as we back up this protected machine, as we take snapshots, which repository do we want those snapshots to go into? If we drill this down, under the deduplication heading, here we see how many dedupe hits and misses we've had. And so the more hits we have, obviously the more advantage we're taking from the deduplication. The misses are obviously blocks that had to be written to the repository. The hits are ones that we didn't have to write that same block of data to the repository because it already exists. So there's the difference being between AppAssure 4 and AppAssure 5 was that deduplication in 4 occurred per agent, and deduplication in 5 occurs per repository. So if you have 26 or 30 agents all backing up into one repository, any block of data that exists in the repository doesn't have to be written again. And during our research and during all the trial and all the work we've done with the plethora of image-based backup vendors out there, this is a real shining star for AppAssure. And it is a feature we've not seen anywhere else. So as I mentioned before, we put a lot of emphasis on the BDR and recovery point objectives and recovery time objectives during our sales process. And our operational side really has to be able to back up the claims that our sales team is making, and they have to be able to support these recovery point objective demands that our clients are making out of us. So on the operational side, we've really got to be on top of what the backups are doing, and are they replicating offsite? Do we have valid data? Is exchange attachability, was it successful the last hourly snapshot? And the reporting or the event notification in AppAssure is very, very powerful. So we've got our notification groups here, and just by default, this is the one out-of-the-box configuration. But each of these, we have the ability to get very granular at what we want to report on. So if we protect a cluster, like an exchange cluster, did it fail? Was it complete? Did one of the nodes fail? So if we drop down through this event list, there is just a lot of alerting that we can get out of the AppAssure core service. This push install, for example, you don't have to actually physically touch the protected machines in order to install the AppAssure agent. With proper credentials, the core service or your AppAssure core source core can push the protection agent onto these machines and can schedule them for reboots if need be. We have nightly attachability alerting, started, finished, failed, finished with errors. This list of alerting is just a mile long. The big ones for us are protection. Did a transfer fail? Was it partially failed? Did we get one volume but not the other volume? Was it skipped? Was it skipped because an agent was offline? So we monitor these transfer alerts and events quite heavily, as well as our, yes?
Quick question from Mark. He says, so sorry to interrupt, but just I think it's really relevant to what you're going through here. Mark wants to know, so is there no longer a requirement for a replay admin service account and its associated local agent permissions?
That is correct. Our best practice generically is to create a backup service. It's just a Windows domain account that has administrative credentials. But really the only time that's required is to push these agents onto the machines, to do the remote agent push. You do have to specify, you have to give domain credentials that would allow the software to be installed. I actually don't know if the service itself starts under that account with the credentials that you use, or if it starts under the system. Something I could check pretty easily. I have a feeling it actually runs under the system account. But again, don't quote me on that. If you'd like to contact me kind of offline, or if we've got time at the end here during and after Q&A, I can quick check on one of our protected servers.
Great.
So replication is something we monitor pretty heavily as well. We monitor pairing and replication configuration, but heavily we monitor the transfers. Are we successfully getting data off-site, and making sure those things are happening and they're not timing out, and we're not running into time commitments where we replicate very heavily during the slow hours or during the nighttime hours of a client, as to not consume bandwidth during the day. And so we've had no troubles with replication to the eFolder AppAssure Cloud. Connectivity has always been solid. Actually, I don't think we've had a single instance where we've had any trouble replicating. I think that was the last piece I had to touch on during the demo. Be more than happy to take any questions that we've got at this point, or we can jump back over to the slide deck. I'm kind of at the whim of the audience now.
Yeah, so let's do this. Let's get back into the presentation. I want to get the GoToMeeting thing on top here, and then get a presentation mode. Okay, there we go. So there's a bunch of questions that have rolled in, Jonas, so I want to try to tackle some of these right now. So let's see here. So Daryl and one other person. Well, Daryl wants to know, is the core machine provided by eFolder, the BDR appliance, or is it a machine server that we set up at each client? Perhaps both of these options are available. So let me kind of just answer and first say that with this particular service offering today, eFolder is not supplying a piece of hardware, a server to operate as the source core and as a recovery point. So today, you need to configure that piece of hardware on your own. It is on our product roadmap, however, to release a BDR appliance that we believe will work very well with the solution and be very similar to the eFolder Shadow Protect BDR product line that we have shipping today, where we've got a series of BDR appliances that are spec'd out to go with StorageCraft Shadow Protect. So it is on the roadmap. Now, there was kind of a follow-on question to that, which is related, and Jonas, could you maybe talk a little bit about the hardware and software that you're using today, and is it capable of virtualizing the recovery VM, et cetera? That's what Steve wants to know.
In our larger AppAssure environments, we have virtualization and shared storage infrastructure set up already. So we don't, at some of our larger sites, we don't actually provision the hardware of the source core itself to be a virtualization target. In some of our smaller sites, we do, and it's just AppAssure 5 has the ability to export to a Hyper-V image. So we just run Windows Server Standard on the source core, and there's no proprietary software needed other than the AppAssure software itself and Hyper-V, so that if we ever have to do an on-box recovery, we can spin that virtual machine up as a Hyper-V guest, and that has worked out very well for us. I can say that the AppAssure software itself, because of the deduplication, is very resource intensive. Our largest core is a multi-processor Xeon server. It's got 16 gigs of memory, and it runs pretty taxed. Backing up a 400 user Exchange box every hour. A very heavy SharePoint server. So the source core itself has got to be a pretty robust piece of hardware, depending on the size of the environment, just because of the hardware requirements needed to do the deduplication. Very processor intensive, very memory intensive. So that's my advice there. To kind of touch base on a question that was asked a little bit ago on what account the agent service runs under, I just did confirm it does actually run under the local system. So the user credentials required to push an agent, obviously, if you've got domain admin, that's great, but you don't require that same service account that you did with AppAssure 4.
Okay, so there's a whole bunch of questions in here, and I encourage everyone to continue to ask questions. I'm going to just make a couple concluding remarks before we go in just full Q&A mode. Actually, no, I'm not. Jonas, maybe spend just a couple minutes talking about how you take your managed services to market. I completely forgot about this.
Yeah, gladly. We have gotten away completely from price per device and price per service. We do, internally during our process or our proposal development process, we do kind of a la carte bundle the services. Starting, if you use this image here on this slide as kind of a jumping off point, starting at the very core in the most, the innermost circle at a managed server, and layering on kind of additional services, desktops, AV, spyware, firewall, different logs. Then we get into network and business continuity, which is where AppAssure and eFolder come in, and then help desk services. We present that to the user based on their needs as an all-in price per month. It's not broken down to X number of dollars for a server, X number for a workstation, Y for a BDR license, and Z for offsite storage. We just do our due diligence kind of in the network audit phase and in our proposal development process, so that we can come back to the client with an all-in amount, and they're just presented with a single monthly rate. So we've had a lot of success with it. It's a lot easier for them to understand. We're not paying just X number of dollars for this workstation, and if we add another workstation, it's going to be another $60 or whatever those numbers may be. And then to protect ourselves and to also protect our clients, we build a buffer, what we call a FTE, or a full-time employee expansion or reduction. So as a provider, we may absorb a 10% growth in staff, And as a customer, they may absorb a 10% reduction in staff. If we ever get outside of those bounds, we'll evaluate our pricing as need be. But because we're traditionally going to market either to replace or provide, a full IT department where, we don't supplement very often. So, user accounts and adds, changes, deletes typically fall in our hands. So we do have the ability to monitor and track, how large the organization is getting, and are they shrinking, and we can kind of forecast if that buffer we've built, if we're going to have to reevaluate that. But it's a strategy that's worked very well for us. There's less pricing confusion. There's less kind of haggling with the customer over price. It's just kind of an all-in, no questions asked, all-you-can-eat service based on what their needs are. And those needs are, like I said, kind of built from these rings that are shown in the slide.
Okay, great. So let me just make a couple, Jonas, thank you. Let me just make a couple kind of concluding remarks so that everybody kind of knows, from a licensing and sourcing perspective, where to go to get things. We talked a little bit about a moment ago about the BDR appliance itself, but basically, where eFolder is playing in this market today is we have a strategic relationship with Dell AppAssure, where we are providing the first and only public cloud replication service that is specifically designed for AppAssure software. So if you are an eFolder partner today, you have access to this service bundle. If you're not yet an eFolder partner, you are able to join our partner program by beginning to use this service. That's the only requirement to actually join the partner program. You just need to start with a minimum of $100 a month in billings and under this service offering, and you can become an eFolder partner. And partners can source both the software and the eFolder cloud services directly from eFolder. And then, of course, we supply that to you on a wholesale basis, billed as a monthly recurring charge, and then you turn around and add all of your value, all your extra services, your total managed service offering in the case of Jonas's approach to go to market, and then you go out there and serve your clients and serve them well. There was a question, and I noticed it, but I'm blanking on who asked it. Somebody wanted to know, can you use AppAssure software and replicate to somewhere else? And the answer is yes. I mean, AppAssure software, comes with replication built in. So you can build your own private cloud environment. A mid-enterprise account with the geographically diverse locations could replicate from site to site. That's built-in functionality with AppAssure. So, you may not need the additional value that eFolder adds to the equation. The reality is, though, for the vast majority of SMB clients, they don't really have the geographical diversity of offices and data centers to replicate to. They need a target replication source that's world-class, and that's where the eFolder AppAssure Cloud comes in. So just a couple comments on pricing. This is how the service is priced. Basically, you can source the AppAssure software licenses from eFolder, and they're $50 per server per month. So kind of back to the details we went through earlier. The core doesn't cost anything. The core is a piece of software you put on that source core, but you pay for each agent that gets deployed to each server, physical or virtual server, and that's $50 per server per month. And if you source them through eFolder, you need to start out with a minimum commitment of 10 servers. And then the cloud piece is $50 per 250 gigabytes, which is effectively 20 cents a gig. And you need to start out with a minimum of 500 gigabytes to get started. And then it goes up from there. And the beauty of this type of pricing approach is you're able to really manage your capacity and then only add those additional 250 gigabytes of logical storage as you need it, as you add new clients, as the amount of data you're storing in our cloud grows. And then we talked about the eFolder Continuity Cloud. What makes the eFolder Continuity Cloud pricing unique is that you only pay for it when you need it. It's $150 a week for the medium node and $450 a week for the large node. That's the wholesale price to you, the partner. You can use the Continuity Cloud node to support multiple clients, and you only pay for it when you need it, either in an emergency or on an as-needed basis. And we don't require you to have any minimums. You can have access to the Continuity Cloud if you have a single client deployed and backed up or replicated to the eFolder cloud. So there's no minimums. We don't charge you a higher per gigabyte fee to have this capability either. You just pay for it when you need it, either for an emergency or restorations of various kinds or testing or what have you. If you're not yet an eFolder partner, the beauty of getting started with the eFolder AppAssure Cloud service is you get access to the entire suite of eFolder services. You get access to all of the other benefits of being an eFolder partner, including partner branding, wholesale monthly billing, Made in America support, access to our complete partner portal, a named account manager. And to get started, all you need to do is begin with a minimum of $100 in monthly billings around the eFolder AppAssure Cloud service offering. So just to kind of make some final comments before we hop back in a couple minutes of Q&A, eFolder is helping the IT channel adapt to the migration to the cloud. We allow you to brand your service offering, price it how you want it, deliver it as your own unique service offering, and allow you to really have your own differentiated offering in the market. And we help you thrive because eFolder partners are able to realize substantially higher monthly recurring gross margins than a lot of other services on the market. And backup, disaster recovery, and business continuity is really some of the most profitable service offerings that the IT channel can take to clients out there today. We'll hop back with that. We'll hop back into the Q&A log here. Let me just quickly give one to Jonas. So Bruce wants to know, can we replicate the backups from the source core to eFolder and to our own data center as well? Is eFolder only storing the data in one data center? Correct. So I think the answer to that is yes, we're storing it in one data center, and then, but Jonas, can you talk about the technical capabilities of replicating to multiple locations?
That is actually something I've never tried to configure an agent to back up to more than one target core. Just take a quick peek here. If I can answer that.
Well, while you're doing that, why don't you look that up, Jonas, and then let me answer a couple other questions. So Steve wants to know, if we have AppAssure software from another vendor, another source, can we still use the eFolder AppAssure Cloud? And the answer is yes. eFolder partners want us to be a licensing point for the AppAssure software because it simplifies their sourcing life and their sourcing strategy. However, you can procure the software directly from Dell AppAssure as well, and then use the eFolder cloud service. So we're really indifferent on where you actually license the software itself. A different question from Fadi: what is the difference between the medium and the large continuity clouds? Let me answer that question and then answer one other question that came in about just the capabilities of the continuity cloud. Basically the difference between medium and large comes down to the amount of storage, the amount of RAM, basically the amount of horsepower you need in the recovery environment. So we've got a detailed spec sheet. We've got detailed spec sheets and detailed information on the eFolder website about the detailed differences between a medium node and a large node. And then there was a different question, and the log is so filled with questions I can't find who asked it, but they wanted to know about kind of the networking capability. So here it is. Benjamin wants to know, how do you establish connectivity from your local subnet to the continuity cloud when your server is down? Want to know if there's a VPN option in case you need to have AD authentication. So The first comment I'll make is that we've got at least 2 really good deep dive webinar sessions that are up on our YouTube channel on the Continuity Cloud. Kevin Hoffman, our CEO and CTO, did a full-blown demo of the Continuity Cloud in one of those sessions, so you can go and watch that on demand on YouTube. But the answer to the question is the Continuity Cloud comes with a whole host of very robust networking capabilities. So it includes a virtual firewall where you can configure, a bunch of different typical network settings that you would find on a router or a firewall, and you can configure things like IPsec and Open VPNs, into the Continuity Cloud. And the whole purpose there is it gives you the flexibility to simulate that client environment in the cloud, so that when you're running those servers that have been virtualized in the middle of a disaster, that they look to the remote user community just like the servers that were back in the office. So Jonas, I guess, were you able to discover the answer to that question in terms of multi-site replication?
I wasn't. I tried to set up another remote core on the demo machine we've got, and I did get a warning, but I can't confirm if that warning can be bypassed or not. I mean, from the core, you do have the ability to wire up or configure multiple target cores or multiple offsite replications. But as far as adding an agent to multiple outgoing replication targets, I don't know if that's possible or not. It does warn you, when you try to do that, it does warn you that it's already replicated to an existing offsite core.
Yeah, and I think the question was about the former. Can you, from the source core, replicate to multiple different target cores? And I think the answer to that is yes. So it's like a one-to-many. There's a one-to-many option there in terms of target replication. So there were several questions about AppAssure version 4, and let me just try to answer all of them really quickly. eFolder, the eFolder Cloud, does support AppAssure version 4 with some caveats. The first caveat is it's not recommended because version 5 is shipping, generally available, highly stable, and really what we recommend. It has all the features you really need. We will support a managed core on your behalf with version 4, but there's no encryption. That's the first comment we would make about version 4. The second comment is there's no migration path from version 4 to version 5. So you need to do kind of a hard reboot, if you will, when you migrate to 5 anyway. So there's not a lot of logic in utilizing version 4 for new installs going forward. But we can support a replication target in our cloud with version 4. But there are some drawbacks. Let's see here. So Rusty wants to know. So Jonas, Rusty asks, I believe you make the 8. Oh, I think he's answering the question. Let's see here. There's so many questions. So Bruce wants to know a little bit about support. We only have time, unfortunately, folks, for 1 or 2 more questions. But let's see here. So Bruce wants to know, what is the procedure for support calls if we are an eFolder AppAssure partner? Does eFolder take support calls for AppAssure-specific issues, or do we call them directly? So if you are an eFolder partner, you call us for all support for your organization. We don't take calls from your end-user clients, but we support both the AppAssure software and our cloud services. If you've sourced and licensed the AppAssure licenses from us. So again, that's the, I think, we make no secret of it. The quality of eFolder partner support is one of our strategic advantages in the marketplace today. So I think you will find your support experience exemplary, whether your question is specifically about the software or about the cloud services that are also supporting the software. So I think in the interest of time, that's all the time we have for questions. We like to start on time and end on time, and we're out of time. So Jonas, thank you very much for your very informative session today.
Absolutely.
And to all of the eFolder partners and folks thinking about doing business with us, thank you very much for your time today. This is Ted Wholesale signing off for eFolder and the eFolder Expert Series. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.